Welcome to Ancient Nights. This is a storytelling channel. Every story you will hear here is drawn from the ancient world, told in order, from the very beginning of time, moving forward through the centuries, one story at a time. Most of what we tell comes directly from the Bible. Tonight is one of those nights. Tonight, we tell the story of the Garden of Eden, and of the first man and the first woman who lived within it. Last time we told the story of the beginning, of how God spoke light into the darkness, gathered the seas, raised the dry land, filled the world with living things, and finally formed a human being from the dust of the ground and breathed into him the breath of life. Tonight, we step into the garden where that human being was placed, a garden unlike anything that has existed since. The text tells us that God planted a garden in the east, in a place called Eden, and in that garden, he placed the man he had formed. Try to imagine it. A garden made not by human hands, but by God himself. Every tree placed with intention, every path, every clearing, every quiet corner shaped by the same voice that had spoken the stars into being. The text says that out of the ground God made to grow every tree that is pleasant to the sight and good for food. Pleasant to the sight. Before the trees were useful, before they fed anyone, they were beautiful. The garden was made to be looked at, to be enjoyed, to bring delight simply by existing. This is one of the first things we learn about the world God made, that beauty was not an afterthought. It was there from the beginning, woven into creation alongside everything else. A river flowed out of Eden to water the garden, and from there it divided and became 4 rivers, flowing out to water the wider world. The garden was the source, the place from which life flowed outward to everything else, and in the middle of the garden stood 2 trees. One was the tree of life, and the other was the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Hold on to those 2 trees. We will return to them, because much of what happens in this story turns on them. God took the man and placed him in the Garden of Eden to work it and to keep it, to tend it, to care for it. This is worth pausing on. The man was not placed in the garden simply to rest, simply to enjoy himself with nothing to do. He was given a purpose. Work. Not the hard, painful labor that would come later, but meaningful work. The care of a beautiful place, the tending of growing things. From the very beginning, the human being was made to do something, to contribute, to be responsible for the world around him. And then God gave the man a single instruction, one rule in an entire garden of freedom. He said, "You may eat freely of every tree in the garden, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat. For in the day that you eat of it, you shall surely die. Every tree but one." The man could eat from any tree he wished, the tree of life included. Only one tree was forbidden, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. The garden was a place of almost total freedom. A single boundary ran through it, one line that was not to be crossed. Now, the man was alone in the garden, and God said something that he had not said about anything else in all of creation. Through 6 days of making the world, after each thing he made, God had looked at it and called it good. The light, good. The seas, good. The plants, the stars, the creatures, good, good, good. But now, looking at the man alone, God said, "It is not good for the man to be alone." The first time in the entire story of creation that something is called not good, not bad, not wrong. Simply incomplete, unfinished, missing something. The man was alone. And aloneness, God said, was not how things were meant to be. So God said, I will make a helper fit for him, a companion, an equal, someone who would stand beside him, who would share the garden with him, who would be to him what no animal could ever be. But before he made her, something happened. Something gentle and strange and beautiful. God brought all the animals he had made to the man, every beast of the field and every bird of the sky, and he brought them to the man to see what he would call them. And whatever the man called each living creature, that was its name. Think about this moment. The first man, standing in the garden, as the animals came to him one by one, the lion, the eagle, the horse, the dove, and to each one, the man gave a name. To name something is an act of understanding, of attention. To give a name, you must first look closely, observe, understand what the thing is. The man was not simply labeling the animals, he was coming to know them, studying them, recognizing each one for what it was. This was part of what it meant to be made in the image of God, to look at the world with attention, to find words for what exists, to bring order and understanding through language. But as the man named the animals, something became clear, something he may have felt even as he named them, one after another. Among all the animals, the strong ones and the swift ones, the ones that flew and the ones that ran, there was not one that was like him, not one that could be his companion, not one that could share his thoughts, his work, his understanding. The animals were wonderful, but none of them was a match for him. None of them could stand beside him as an equal. The man was still alone. And so God acted. He caused a deep sleep to fall upon the man, a sleep deeper than any ordinary sleep. And while the man slept, God took from his side, from a rib, the text says, from the bone closest to his heart, and from that he built a woman. Notice the word the text uses. It does not say God formed the woman, the way it said he formed the man from dust. It says he built her, constructed her, carefully, deliberately, from something that was already part of the man. She was not made from the dust of the ground as the man had been. She was made from the man himself, from his side, from a part of him that was close to his heart, so that the two of them, from the very beginning, were made of the same substance, bone of the same bone, flesh of the same flesh. And when God had built the woman, he brought her to the man, the way a father might bring a bride to a groom, the way two people are brought together at the beginning of something that will last. And the man woke, and he saw her, and he spoke. And these are the first recorded words of any human being in all of Scripture. Not a command, not a question, not a complaint, a cry of recognition and joy. He said, "This at last is bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. This at last." As though he had been waiting, as though even without knowing what he was waiting for, some part of him had been searching the whole time he named the animals, looking for this, for her, for the one who would finally be like him. And now, at last, she was here. Bone of my bones, flesh of my flesh, the same substance, the same nature, not above him, not below him, but beside him, an equal, a companion, a match. The text adds a reflection here, that this is why a man leaves his father and mother and holds fast to his wife, and the two become one flesh. The bond between them was meant to be the closest bond there is. Two people made of the same substance coming together to become one. And the text says something else, something quiet and tender. It says that the man and the woman were both naked, and they were not ashamed. No shame, no fear, no hiding. They stood together in the garden, in the presence of God and of each other, completely open, completely unafraid. Nothing to conceal, nothing to protect themselves from. This was the world as it was meant to be, a world without shame, without fear, without the need to hide anything from anyone. This was Eden, the garden as it was in the beginning. Two people, made for each other, living in a place of beauty, with meaningful work to do, in the presence of God, with only a single boundary that ran through the whole of their freedom. It was, in every sense, very good. But there was another creature in the garden. The text introduces it carefully. It says that the serpent was more crafty than any other beast of the field that God had made. More cunning, more subtle, more clever in a way that was not innocent. And one day, the serpent came to the woman, and it spoke. It asked her a question, but it was not an innocent question. It was a question designed to plant something, a small seed of doubt, a tiny crack in something that had been whole. The serpent said, "Did God actually say, 'You shall not eat of any tree in the garden'?" Notice what the serpent does here. God had said the opposite. God had said, "You may eat of every tree, except one." A garden of yes, with a single no. But the serpent twists it. It makes it sound as though God had said no to everything, as though God were withholding, restricting, denying, as though the single boundary were the whole story. This is how it began. Not with a lie, exactly. With a question that quietly changed the shape of what God had said. That made generosity sound like restriction. That made a single loving boundary sound like a wall. The woman answered. And at first, she answered well. She said, "We may eat of the fruit of the trees in the garden." But God said, "Of the fruit of the tree that is in the middle of the garden you shall not eat, neither shall you touch it, lest you die." She knew the rule. She stated it. But notice, she added something to it. God had said, "Do not eat." The woman said, "Do not eat, neither shall you touch it." A small addition. Perhaps it had grown in the telling. Perhaps the boundary, repeated over time, had become a little heavier, a little harsher than it had been when God first spoke it. It is a small thing, but it shows something. The crack was already beginning. The simple, clear word of God had started just slightly to shift, and now the serpent struck. It said, "You will not surely die. For God knows that when you eat of it your eyes will be opened and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." Here it is. The lie, fully formed now. You will not surely die. A direct contradiction of what God had said. And then something more cunning still. God knows that when you eat of it, you will be like God. The serpent suggests that God is holding something back, that the boundary is not for the woman's good, but for God's benefit, that God is keeping something from her, some knowledge, some power, some height she could reach if only she would cross the line, that God is not a generous father setting a loving limit, but a rival, guarding his own position, keeping the human beings beneath him. It is a complete reversal of the truth. God, who had given them everything, a whole garden, each other, meaningful work, his own presence, is painted as someone who withholds. The single boundary, set in love, is painted as proof of selfishness. And the woman listened. The text describes what happened next with great care. It says that the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was a delight to the eyes, and that the tree was to be desired to make one wise. 3 things. Good for food. It appealed to her appetite. A delight to the eyes. It appealed to her sense of beauty. Desirable to make one wise. It appealed to her desire to be more, to know more, to rise higher. These are not evil desires in themselves. Hunger, the love of beauty, the longing for wisdom. These are good things, woven into human nature by God Himself. But here they were turned toward the one thing that had been forbidden, the one boundary, the single no in a garden full of yes. And she took of its fruit and ate, and she gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate. The text does not linger on the moment of eating. It moves quickly, almost too quickly, as if the act itself takes only a heartbeat. The deliberation is long. The temptation unfolds slowly. But the act, she took, she ate, she gave, he ate, happens in an instant. And everything changed. The text says that the eyes of both of them were opened, and they knew that they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves coverings. The serpent had been right about one thing. Their eyes were opened. But what they saw was not the height they had been promised. What they saw was themselves. And for the first time, they felt shame. Just moments before, the text had told us that they were both naked and were not ashamed. Now, suddenly, they knew. And the knowing brought shame, and the shame brought hiding. They sewed leaves together to cover themselves. The first act of concealment, the first attempt to hide a part of themselves from each other. Something had broken. The openness was gone. The world without shame was over. And then they heard a sound. The sound of God, walking in the garden in the cool of the day. It is one of the most tender and sorrowful images in all of Scripture. God, walking in the garden in the cool of the evening, as though this were something He had done before, as though there had been other evenings when the man and the woman walked with Him in the fading light, in the quiet, in friendship. But this evening was different. This evening, when they heard the sound of God walking in the garden, the man and the woman hid themselves among the trees. For the first time they were afraid. For the first time they hid from the one who had made them, who had given them everything, who had walked with them in the cool of the day. The friendship was broken. The openness was gone. And in its place, fear, and hiding, and shame. And God called to the man, and He said, "Where are you?" It is a strange question when you think about it. God, who made the heavens and the earth, who knows all things, asking where the man is. He was not asking because He did not know. He was asking because He wanted the man to answer, to come out, to speak, to face what had happened. "Where are you?" And the man answered, "I heard the sound of you in the garden, and I was afraid, because I was naked, and I hid myself." And here the story pauses tonight, on the man and the woman, hidden among the trees, on the broken evening, on the first fear, the first shame, the first hiding, on the question that still echoes, "Where are you?" Let us pause for a moment before we reach the end and sit with what this story has shown us. The Garden of Eden is more than a place. For thousands of years, people have returned to this story and found in it something that speaks to their own lives. Because the garden is, in a sense, a picture of the way things were meant to be. A world of beauty, a world of meaningful work, a world of companionship, where two people stand beside each other as equals, made of the same substance, unashamed. A world where God walks with human beings in the cool of the evening, in friendship, in the quiet of the day's end. And the story of what happened in the garden is, in a sense, a picture of something that happens again and again in every human life. The single boundary, the voice that questions it, the slow reshaping of a generous limit into a cruel restriction. The desire that turns toward the one forbidden thing. And then the act, quick, almost thoughtless, and the long consequences that follow. The serpent did not force the woman to eat. It did not push the fruit into her hands. It only spoke. It asked a question. It planted a doubt. It suggested that God was not as good as he seemed, that the boundary was not for her benefit, that there was something better just beyond the line. And then it stepped back and let her decide. This is how it so often works. Not with force, but with a question. Not with a command, but with a doubt. Did God really say? Is the boundary really for your good? Is the one who set the limit really on your side? And there is something tender, too, in the way God responds. When the man and the woman hid among the trees, God did not strike them down. He did not abandon the garden in anger. He came walking, as he always had, in the cool of the day. And he called out, not in fury, but with a question that sounds almost like grief. Where are you? It is the question of someone looking for a friend who has disappeared, someone who knows that something has changed and who comes looking anyway, someone who, even after everything, still walks in the garden in the evening, still calls out, still wants the man and the woman to come out from their hiding and speak. The story that began in such beauty has turned toward sorrow. But even in the sorrow, God is still there, still walking, still calling, still looking for the ones he made. And so we leave them tonight, the man and the woman hidden among the trees of the garden they were given, the fig leaves sewn together, the evening air cool around them, and the voice of God moving through the garden, asking the question that has echoed through every age since. Where are you? What happens next? The words that pass between God and the man and the woman, the consequences that follow, and what becomes of the garden and of all who came after, we will tell it together next time.